Welcome to another edition of Texans Game Day Menu. I'm Daryl, and today you're going to be dining with me as the Houston Texans beat the Indianapolis Colts for their first win of the season. Today's menu is going to consist of smothered pork chops over a bed of white rice, green beans, and fresh rolls. Okay, to prepare the smothered pork chops, first thing we need to do is get a deep pan, and we'll add some oil to get it hot while we season the pork chops. So the first thing we're going to do is season the pork chops. It's very simple. I have 4 seasonings. I use poultry seasoning, salt, pepper, and some of my famous Slap Your Mama seasoning. And be generous because this is going to be the seasoning for the roux that you're going to make that it's going to simmer in for a while. I like mine a little spicy, so I add a lot of pepper. And once you get it in the pan searing, you can add a little more seasoning to the opposite side. Now first we're going to put the pork chops in the pan with the hot grease to sear them real well on all sides. That's the sound you want to hear. While the pork chops are searing with the seasoned side down, I'm going to add more seasonings to it. Like I said, this is going to be all the seasoning you're going to use when you make your roux for the smothered pork chop sauce. So I add a little pepper, a little more salt, a little bit more of Slap Your Mama. Cook on both sides for about 3.5–4 minutes each side. This is the point here where we'll flip them over. You can see how they've turned a nice golden brown. A little bit of the pork chops are still sticking to the bottom of the pan. That's what you want. That's what flavors your roux that you're going to make. Already smells real good. And you'll let that sit for another 3 or 4 minutes. Okay, so while the pork chops are preparing in the pan, we'll start getting our onions and our garlic ready for the roux that we're going to use for the smothered gravy. This recipe calls for 1 large onion, so I found the biggest one we've got. I'll chop that up. We'll use 4 cloves of garlic. You see, doing it this way gets all the skin off of it real easily. And we'll chop that up. Ready. Alright, once the pork chops are browned on both sides, man, that looks great. What we're going to do is set those aside on your pan on the side. Turn down the heat. Look at those pork chops. You can see at the bottom of the pan we have little bits and pieces of the seasoning and pork chops. So at this point I'm going to add some butter to the pan, let that melt. And then from there we're going to add our onions and we're going to let those caramelize and brown. So we're going to have those cook for a good 10–15 minutes so they can break down in the gravy in the smothered pork chop sauce. So the large onion that I cut up will go into that pan on high heat. Okay, so at this point, onions have been cooking for about 10 minutes. We'll go ahead and add our 4 cloves of garlic and let that cook for about 1 minute. Mix it around, put it together, and it smells great. Okay, at this point the onions look really nice and caramelized. The actual 4 cloves of garlic that I chopped up have been in there for about a minute. So at this point you want to go ahead and make sure you have a little butter or oil, whatever you prefer in there. And you know, different recipes call for different amounts of butter and oil, but you can add what you would like. I like my smothered pork chops with a little thicker gravy, so I'm going to add a little more flour and a little more butter. And once the flour's in there, you want to make sure the mixture is all together, and you will let that sit for another 4 or 5 minutes. once the flour is coated with, or the onions and garlic are coated with the flour, you'll let that brown a little bit. And that's when you'll start adding your liquids. Okay, at this point the onions and the flour and the garlic have been cooking for a little bit, so we're going to go ahead and add about 1.5 cups of chicken broth. And I like to do it a little at a time. Give it a good stir to get that flour and the thickness of the sauce going. Making sure we're mixing all the bits and pieces from the pork chops. A little more. Keep the heat on high. Good, that's starting to look. Make sure you're scraping the bottom to get all the good stuff off of there. Go ahead and add the rest of the broth. You can see that's already kind of thick. Then I'm going to add about 1/4 cup of buttermilk, which also helps the sauce thicken up a little. Once you have that mixture going, it gets nice and smooth. You keep stirring it. Have a cup of water next to you, that way you can add your water. Keep it at a smooth consistency. And as you can see today, guys, I'm wearing my Texans cap and my Astros shirt because the Astros are going to the World Series again. Have beat their record from 1998 with 103 wins. So we'll be watching that game also. At this point, you can see the gravy is kind of thick, so now you want to go ahead and add some water to it because it's going to continue to cook because you're going to add the pork chops back into this for about 45 minutes and let them slow cook until they're falling apart tender. Just lay your pork chops in there, cover them with the sauce. And these do not have to be touching the bottom of the pan because they're going to be cooking off the steam and the sauce that's in there. At this point, what you want to do is spoon a little bit of the sauce over the top so the seasonings will get on there. Could use a little more water. And for the remainder of the time, you're going to let this simmer on about medium heat, and you'll just come around the sides here and stir it, and you can flip the pork chops around. Add your lid to the top so it can steam and become very tender. Okay, at this point we've got the pork chops simmering in the sauce. So I'm going to prepare the other two sides, which is white rice, which I use boil in the bag rice, and any can of green beans, but I like to season up my green beans, so I melt a little butter in the saucepan, chop up some onions. Once the onions have been cooking for about 5 minutes and tender up, you'll go ahead and add your green beans. And then I like to put chopped bacon with just a little more flavor. We'll stir that around. You let it simmer, mix it around with the onions and the bacon for about 10 minutes. Alright guys, everything is prepared. It's about 10 minutes until game time, so I'm starting to plate up my meal. First off, I'll put my rice on the plate. And I'll add a little of the gravy to the rice. Get you a nice tender smothered pork chop. Lay that right on top. Just pour it over the top of your pork chops with little bits of onions. And you notice how I laid that pork chop gently on the bed of rice, you know, just like the NFL is making the defenders do to the quarterbacks. Horrible rule. I hate it. Let these guys hit these quarterbacks. That there, my guys, is smothered pork chops over a bed of white rice, green beans, some fresh rolls. Texans got to do it today because I know the Astros will.